What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark.
Woo woo.
Season 10, episode 6. And dude, I am super pumped. I've been pumped about this for a while. We got Mr. Otis McDonald on the show. Thank you so much, brother.
Hey man, happy to be here.
It's an honor to talk to you. I told you before we went on air, dude, I went down such a deep rabbit hole once I got exposed to you from via Kras videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the highest admiration for people who are multi-instrumentalists but who do it authentically. It's like, dude, I studied piano with this cat at Berkeley, and the first lesson I sat down, he was like, all right, man, play something. And I played, and he was like, all right, stop playing piano like a guitar player. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, the voicings, like how your voice leading, all that stuff, it's like how a guitar player would approach this instrument. But you have such a natural knack with everything I see you move to. And I know you probably worked obviously on this stuff, but I wanted to talk to you about that throughout this show. But first and foremost, I wanted to ask you my original question I ask everyone.
Okay.
What is your earliest musical memory?
My earliest musical memory. That's a tough one. See, because my father is he was a high school music teacher, so I grew up with music around me. But I think maybe my earliest memory is when we lived in this house in Rochester, New York, in the 19th era. Was it the 19th ward? Was that area of Rochester? And we had an attic, and my dad had a studio up in the attic with his tape machines, and had this like really funky carpet. But I just remember him rehearsing with a band. I know the lead singer's name was Gino and the Dynamites or something, but my dad was the drummer, and I just remember them rehearsing, and me just like crawling around on the floor and listening to them play. Yeah,
that is dope. What kind of music were they playing?
it was rock and roll, pop, yeah, soul music. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that
Yeah.
explains a bit about you, like the DNA.
Hey man, yeah, for sure. We spent a lot of time in our family station wagon camping in the summertime. Public school teacher. We didn't have the means to be staying in hotels and flying around the country and stuff. So we did a lot of time in the car with my two older brothers, our dog, my mom and dad. And on those long road trips, I just remember my dad playing so many different styles of music. I remember listening to a lot of early Joni Mitchell, but also listening to Steely Dan, a lot of Paul Simon, also a lot of at the time, the movie The Mission with Robert De Niro was really big, and the soundtrack was by Ennio Morricone. So I remember listening to that a lot as well. But then my brothers, who were older than me, my oldest brother's 9 years older, and my other brother Peter is 5 years older. They were getting really into what was contemporary at the time. So obviously Michael Jackson was gigantic in our household. I'm a kid from the 80s. But then like early hip hop, I remember hearing Public Enemy. I remember hearing Moni Love. I don't know if you remember Yo-Yo, like don't play with my yo-yo.
Yeah.
And then also like Ghetto Boys and NWA. And so I remember hearing all that stuff. And then my brothers would also like dig deep into my dad's record collection and find like Billy Cobham, Spectrum, like Red Baron, and they'd dub that on a cassette, and then they'd be in like the back of the station wagon, like trying to rap. And I'd just be admiring them, because I just wanted to be as cool as my big brothers.
So do you think they had a pretty like heavy influence on you in terms of like the direction you went?
1000%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was in second grade, or second or third grade, I forget. I was 7 years old, and I remember our teacher. I went to a city school in Rochester, so we didn't have the greatest music program, but I had this wonderful teacher who was friends with a local jazz ensemble, and she organized an assembly. They came in and played in our gymnasium. We didn't have a theater or anything, and I was struck by the upright bass. I was like, wow, what a cool instrument. And I came home from school And my oldest brother, Adrian, was home from college at the time. And he had just started playing guitar. And our other brother, Peter, was the first one to start playing guitar. And Peter at the time was like middle school, I think probably 8th grade. And I think they both chose the guitar because that was an instrument my dad did not play. And they were like, all right, he'll leave us alone if we play this instrument. It's hard having a dad as a music teacher. And so
Totally.
I came home and I was like, man, I want to play the upright bass. And my brother Adrian was like, nah, you don't got to worry about that. Peter and I are already playing strings. You should play the drums. And he was like, and I know how to play a drum beat. And so he took me upstairs to that studio in the attic that I was telling you about and taught me my first drum beat. And then I was working on it, and then my dad came home from school and heard me up there, and my dad's a drummer. And so, like, thinking back on it, my brothers just kind of set me up. They're like, we'll get dad to focus on Joe.
Right.
And then my dad attempted to give me lessons, and then very quickly we realized that probably wasn't the best relationship. We'll just be father and son,
Right.
but he recognized my love for playing music and just kind of let me mess around with it. And then by the time I got into it was 5th grade, they took me out of city schools and got me into one of the suburbs called Penfield, and they had a great arts program there. And then in 5th grade they introduced wind ensemble and orchestra, and you could pick an instrument. And everybody wanted to play percussion, so I didn't get to play percussion, but my dad recommended that I check out the trombone. And so I started playing trombone, and I played that all the way through the end of high school, meanwhile picking up other instruments throughout my schooling. So, but it all started with the drums.
So two questions. One, what kind of kit was that upstairs?
Oh man, well, that kit is the same very kit that you see me play in every one of those videos.
No
It's here in
way.
my studio. Yeah, that's an early 60s Camco drum set. So my dad had good taste. And the story about that drum set is so this was in the 80s. And my dad was teaching at a private school called the Harley School. And every year the Harley school would clean out stuff and have the Harley garage sale, and anybody that was in the community of that school could attend the garage sale. And I think that year maybe the music program got a new Pearl export or something, but they had these Camcos, and so they sold them, and they had them priced for $20.
Oh
And
my God,
this is
dude.
probably like 1984, something like that, 85. And my dad knew what they were, and they also had a Slingerland Radio King snare drum sitting there. And my dad said, I'll give you 25 if you throw in the snare drum. And so they did.
Oh
And so that kit was originally just the kick drum, the rack tom, and the snare drum, the matching snare, and didn't have a floor tom. And then my dad had other drum sets, and as I got more serious about drums, specifically in high school, that's when I really started studying. And my pop set me up with this great teacher in town named Rich Thompson, who used to play with the Basie band. And when I started getting serious about the drums and I started playing a lot more gigs, I needed to get my own drum set. And my dad knew how much I loved those Camcos, and he didn't really play them much anymore at the time. And so he gave them to me, but he made a deal. It was like, you gotta save your money. I was working at a grocery store, and he was like, you save your money, find a matching floor tom. And but of course Camcos, they don't make them anymore. They sold that company to DW in the 70s. And so my pop suggested maybe I find a Gretsch floor tom, because they're both maple wood, and he showed me how to refinish the drums. And so we like stripped the finish off and stuff. But actually no, I wasn't working at a grocery store. I was working at a music shop already at this point. I was working at Music Lovers in Rochester, New York. And the guy who ran the drum department had this magazine called The Not So Modern Drummer. And I don't know if they still publish it, but in the back of that there was always the classifieds. So this was like 97, 98 or something. And I saw an ad for a Camco Cloud Badge tuxedo lug, which is not the lugs that DW adopted. This was the early Camcos. They had a different lug before they went to the round lug, you know. And so this guy in Santa Cruz, California, which is funny because now I live near Santa Cruz, but this guy in Santa Cruz, California had a floor tom that matched my drum set, and it was $400. But I bought it cash on delivery. I don't know if they still do that. And yeah, and then I refinished it. I remember it was on one of our winter breaks. It came in the mail, and my dad and I refinished it outside in the cold and got it done in time for me to play a gig that I had like that next weekend. And when I moved to San Francisco 22 years ago, before I got on the plane to come out here, I packed all my clothing inside that drum set. And when I got a place to live, my parents shipped out the drums to me. And now they're out here. And yeah, so a lot of people always ask me, how do you get your drums to sound like that? Well, part of the reason is I've been playing that drum set my entire life, you know, since I was 7 years old.
So, man, there's some magic in that, dude. I mean, it really
those
is.
Drums.
Oh, dude. Yeah. What's the depth of that snare drum?
Well, the Camco snare drum, it's just like a standard, what is that, like 14 by 3 or something? 14 diameter by, is it by 3 or maybe 2.5 or something?
Is that a piccolo then?
Well, okay, so what you see me play in all the videos, I use a Yamaha piccolo snare with that kit. I've been using that snare drum pretty regularly for the last 6 to 7 years. I gave a drum lesson to a local drummer in town, and he's like, look, I don't really have much to pay you, but I have this snare drum that I think you might like. You know, he's like, far as I can tell, this is like what Questlove was using in the late 90s, like on Voodoo and Mama's Gun, the Erykah Badu record. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I want that sound. And I got it, and I didn't use it for a little while, and then I tuned it right, and then started recording it when I had my studio in our home, and before I moved into this studio. And then I really kind of found the sweet spot. I was like, oh, I could put all the dampeners, like big fat snare drum and Roots EQ, all these cool things you can put on top, and it might lower the pitch, but it doesn't lose that snap. And that's always kind of been my biggest complaint about a lot of modern drum sounds when they try to get that like old school sound. It just sounds dead, but there's no pop to it. And I love drummers like Bernard Purdy or Clyde Stubblefield or Steve Gadd. Steve Gadd would be the closest to what I think a lot of people try to get that sound to sound like, but Steve's sound always had a snap to it as well, you know. And so that was something I've been working on. And then of course I love Jay Dilla so much that I want that snappiness that I would hear on his records or on Tribe Called Quest records that I would listen to in high school with my homies, you know. So I was just trying to get some sort of you know, mixture of like hip hop and funk, and you know, have this modern sonic aesthetic, but definitely paying a lot of reverence to like old school sounds, you know.
It's crazy because I think that's what really drew me to you, because like I feel the same way about a snare sound. I can't stand like I like the snap but without the ring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Yeah.
It's so hard to like get that. And like, granted, I have a Superphonic, and my buddy like,
oh, those
like,
are great.
He's like, I got like 16 of these. You just take it, dude.
Yeah.
And I've never kind of messed with tuning it in a certain way, but I love that like throw my wallet on it to dampen it kind of thing.
That's all you got to do.
But yeah, but your sound, like anytime I hear like stuff from your music that you release, there's something about, like you were saying, there's something about how that snare reacts. And it's also your feel. I mean, your feel in your pocket is just
thanks, man.
So unique and so great that it's hard for a dummy like me to try to replicate that. But the sonics of that, I think, is what drew me to like what you do, because
oh man, thank you.
Yeah, but even like the musician prowess that you carry and everything, there's like this looseness, but also this like deep pocket. And I think when I hear you play the drums, like I've often put your stuff on and just practiced to just your groove.
Oh wow!
Just because I like that vibe, and that it settles. It's something about playing to stuff like that that's grounding too as a musician, that I can like put myself in a different pair of shoes, because I play in a jam band, so it's like it's
Oh,
very
sweet.
very different. But listening to what you do, and I'm a huge funk head, and I love all that stuff, and I love old R&B and Motown, and so it's the sonics of what you do really really knocked me out of my chair the first time I heard your stuff,
Oh
like
man,
your music.
thank you so much. That's
Yeah,
very
man.
kind of you.
But the second part of my question, when you were saying, and I played the trombone, and then I just learned a bunch of instruments after that.
Uh-huh.
How many other instruments, and what other instruments, and how did you manage to do that? Where'd you find the time to do that?
Well, I was really lucky with the influences in my household, and my parents, very much encouraged us to pursue the things that we loved, and they never got in our way of doing that. So that was awesome. And then having a studio in the house, that my dad started showing me how to use the gear at a pretty young age, that helped really inform the way I approached a lot of instruments that I would pick up and essentially just practice while recording and doing multi-track recording. I mean, it's really just, that was the way I would practice. But sorry, I'm getting a little off track here. So um, I told you I started playing trombone in fifth grade. Fifth grade was also the year I discovered Nirvana. And like I had heard them because I remember Smells Like Teen Spirit when that came out, maybe like a year or two prior. And so fifth grade was the year, for me, was the year that Kurt Cobain passed away. And I got into their music maybe a week before he killed himself. And I was like so obsessed with the sound. And it basically, from like my youngest musical recollections, the way I would listen to music all the way to fifth grade, it was Michael Jackson and dance music and funk oriented music. And then Nirvana was like, whoa, this is guitar music. Now I want to actually play the guitar. And so I went back to my brother Peter, who was still in the house because the oldest brother was in college, but Peter was home. I was like, dude, how do you play this kind of music? And he showed me how to play power chords, how to play bar chords. And once I learned that, it was like, boom, like just everything exploding, like, oh my God, I can play any one of these songs now. And so I would just learn, and it was like a party trick. I could like pull it out at friends' parties and be like, oh, you want to hear that Stone Temple Pilots song? Here you go. And I was actually, Stone Temple Pilots always a little bit more complicated. They always had some really rich harmonies, and Soundgarden too. But like Nirvana and like Pearl Jam, Green Day, like Weezer, like I would bust all that stuff out. And then probably around that same time, fifth grade, I also heard Herbie Hancock for the first time. So like, talk about complete opposite worlds. But again, I was open to anything that sounded cool to me. And I think it was my brothers again. I think my brother Peter was digging through my parents' record collection, and he came across Headhunters, and I remember him putting on Chameleon, and that just kind of knocked my socks off. And then he pulled out the Thrust record, and I remember hearing the opening on there, Palm Grease, and that really made me want to try to figure out how to play the bass. In fact, I remember sitting at my dad's Yamaha keyboard that you could like program stuff on, and it had a bunch of different sounds, and I programmed Palm Grease, like the intro. I would program the drums, the percussion, and then I kind of tried to figure out what was happening in the keyboards, and I'd never really messed with the keyboard. So that it was really, fifth and sixth grade, I just started kind of adding these other instruments, just the rhythm section instruments, and just wanted to see what it was all about. And then I started my first band around that same time, maybe like seventh grade. I met other kids that were also playing guitar and was into this different music, rock music, and then of course classic rock music. And seventh grade is when the Beatles anthology, that documentary, came out, and then all of a sudden I was holy shit, well, these guys are unbelievable. And I knew a couple Beatles tunes, but when I watched that documentary and I saw how like just incredible and prolific they were, but also just really kind of mature for their age in making decisions like, I don't want to play live anymore because we can't get better and people are screaming, so let's just be a band that records. And I just thought that was so cool. Even as a 12-year-old, I was like, wow, that's such a cool idea. Like, we're not going to do it for you, we're going to do it for us. And that was it, man. Once I saw that shit and I started my first band, and that was it. I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, like recording and performing. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you go through, like, was there a period of time where like that heavier music was like more at the front of the focus? Or was it like you were still kind of bouncing around between all the stuff that you were listening to, including Herbie and Nirvana and all that?
When you say heavier music, you mean like the heavier rock
Like
oriented stuff?
the grunge scene,
The grunge
like,
stuff?
yeah.
That was pretty much all I was listening to 5th and 6th grade. Once I got hip to it, it definitely, it was always every school year I was kind of getting into something different, but I would always still be listening to that, but I would just keep trying. It's like a drug, right? You like hear something that you've never heard before, and it it resonates with you for some reason. You're just chasing that feeling. I'm still chasing that feeling, and I don't get it as much as I used to, uh, but I'm always searching for it. But yeah, I would say 5th and 6th grade was the grunge stuff, and then that was an easy way to transition into the Beatles and psychedelic, cool, backward sounds. And so like I'd never heard anything like that. And then 8th grade, right before 8th grade, my dad had me organize his record collection, and and I learned a lot that day. But the standout was learning about progressive rock music, and I heard Yes for the first time that day.
Oh, snap.
And then I heard Gentle Giant, and then I was just kind of off to the races with that music. I definitely, I was I was definitely not listening to a lot of the shit that all my friends were at school. I would have anything from Close to the Edge, or like Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. That was heavy in our house too. And then of course the Grateful Dead, and that was kind of my gateway into the jamming world. And then by the time 9th grade hit, it was jam bands, and it was Fish mostly, because Fish was like huge on the East Coast. I mean, Fish is huge everywhere, but they were much bigger on the East Coast. I think still kind of a lot more popular on the East Coast.
I would agree. Yeah.
And I went to my first Fish show when I was 15, and that actually that is you said you're in a jam band, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you a fan of Fish?
Oh my God, dude, I just posted a video on Instagram today that I was jamming over 46 days because my buddy has that software he can pull Trey out. And I've been like trying to, with my 335, I've been trying to see if I can get close to those Trey tones. And I was like, oh my God, I think I figured it out.
Oh, okay,
so
cool.
I posted that today.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I don't listen to him much anymore. It was mostly like early high school, but always really appreciated them, and actually got to play with some of those guys too. But that movie that they released, Bittersweet Hotel, remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of that footage is from my very first concert, seeing them at the War Memorial in Rochester. Yeah.
Dude.
And they like opened with like Punch You in the Eye, and yeah, it was just unreal. I was like, oh, holy shit, this looks fun. But I gotta point out, I was always really into funk and rhythm and blues music throughout this whole time. Like, I should say, I was into progressive rock, but also 8th grade, I discovered Parliament and got really into that stuff as well, and Stevie Wonder. And so that stuff was always floating around, probably because Michael Jackson is like the earliest stuff I can remember listening to. So that was just seeped in my blood, But But because of Fish, I discovered the band Medeski, Martin and Wood, and that kind of brought me back to this funk-oriented improvisational world. And then that same year is when John Scofield's A Go-Go record came out, and that just melted me. And that basically took me out of the Fish world, and now I was like, okay, I am into this stuff, and studying jazz music, and I wanna learn how to be great at jazz, but I always want to be funky and groovy like these guys. And then of course Soul Live came out like a year later, and I used to go see them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then senior year, I'm taking you through like all the years, right?
I love it. I absolutely love this because it's teaching me so much about like it's making sense to me more and more. I'm listening.
Oh,
to
okay.
This is great.
So then senior year, I was in the All-State Jazz Conference playing drums, and I played drums for the jazz choir, and I dated this I met this girl there, and we kind of dated for a little bit, but she introduced me to Erykah Badu, and that like she was really into the Erykah Badu live album, and that was really cool. But when I got interested in checking out Erykah, she had just put out the album Mama's Gun, and that really kind of changed my whole life. Because senior year I was jazz, studying this stuff and auditioning for schools. I ended up going to the Eastman School of Music. But by the time I got to Eastman, I was so deep into this neo soul thing that was happening. I didn't know people were still making records that reminded me of like the 70s soul music that I was really into. And I was also really into A Tribe Called Quest and the Roots. I discovered Tribe in like 8th grade, but I was revisiting a lot of that stuff my senior year. And then I discovered the Roots that year. And then when I was at Eastman, because I was just listening to that stuff all the time rather than listening to what I was supposed to be listening to at school. I remember some of my classmates, they were like, "Hey, have you ever heard Voodoo by D'Angelo?" And I was like, "No, I don't know. I don't even know who that is." And then they put out, and then I basically dropped out of college after that. I heard that record. I was like, "Oh, okay. I want to do this." Because I'm not going to learn how to do this here at jazz school. And also I was going to school in my hometown, and to save money, I was still living at home and just commuting to school every day. So I didn't really have that experience that, people had moving away. And so my parents were like, "Hey, why don't you take a break? And you might want to check out San Francisco," because my oldest brother had just moved here. And so I didn't go back. I dropped out like 2 weeks before my sophomore year of college. And I stuck around for the first semester, saving monies, waiting on tables. And then at the beginning of January 2003, I moved here and never looked back.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. It's like, and you know what's really cool too, and like that's why I said this is great listening to you go through the years, because it's such, to me, that's like the most interesting pathways to hear people, the path people have walked to get where they are now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
What has defined you as Otis McDonald right now, like, is the music you grew up on, the music that you dove deep into, and then you hopped out of, and you dive into something else. You get what you can from that. You move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are now. You have your own fingerprint.
That's right.
I think that's what we all hope for, right? Is like, you sound like a bad version of your influences in a way that becomes you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that, like, when you were talking about Voodoo, it's like when I hear your stuff and I hear this kind of lo-fi thing you do sometimes, and like, some of this other like drag the beat, pull it way back kind of thing. Like, I don't know of anyone else besides you that can do that thing. Like, can do that Quest thing as well as you do it. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. Oh, that's very kind of you. There's a lot of great drummers out there that can do it. I feel like better than me, or I don't know. It just kind of, I feel like a lot of, when that thing hit, that style of drumming you're talking about, it really was informed by Jay Dilla, who wasn't playing the drums. He was programming it. Right. And that influenced the way D'Angelo and Questlove approached playing those songs that they were writing for that album. But after that, it was like it was like a revolution of people trying to emulate that on the drum set, and where people would go so far that it just kind of became unlistenable to me, where I was just like, well, that doesn't feel good at all. So, but I'm obsessed with Dilla. I love his stuff, and when you really listen to it, it actually is. It's not as crazy as people think. It actually is closer to the way any classic funk drummer plays.
Hmm.
And it's that's really kind of what I try to not necessarily emulate, but like pay tribute to. It's like, yeah, you can swing certain elements, but how do you it to me it was just like a challenge, and how can you do that with your limbs, that that it's just not a natural way of playing, but how can you make it feel natural? And so it just became another creative coordination challenge, which was anything I was really kind of studying in when I went to music school. It was like how to just get independence in all your limbs, and but I just wanted to do it through this kind of boom bap thing, because that just always feels the best to me, you know.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Well, so let me ask you, because since we're on this tip of like getting into the well, first, tell me a Jay Dilla record I need to check out. Because honestly, man, I've heard Jay's some of the stuff I've heard, but what's like a record I need to check out?
Oh man. Well, I don't really listen to any specific albums. Of course, like Donuts
Right.
was my introduction to him, but he doesn't even do a lot of that thing on there. But I'll tell you what, the one that I don't want to call it the wrong thing here, but I'm just gonna pull it up on.
I'm terrible with names too, man. I'm just like I always forget.
No, it's a well, I love J Love Japan. I don't know if you know that one.
No.
Yeah, that's very cool. This is a lot of stuff that has come out after he passed away.
Okay.
But that's not the one I was thinking of off the top of my head. The one that really kind of blew me wide open was gosh, there's a lot of oh yeah, the Dilla Lost Tapes, Reels and More. I really love that. And then all of the King of Beats series, like 1 through 4 or 5, I think, yeah, 4 of them. Those are all really great. And then of course, like Welcome to Detroit is awesome. But I have been collecting like his bootleg tapes for a long time, so I think I have like everything, and so I could send you a link to some of this stuff. But also just the productions he would do for other people's records, like Common's Like Water for Chocolate album. Do you know that
I
record?
love Common. Yeah.
Oh man, well, Like Water for Chocolate, that that is Dilla, like all over that. Or
Okay.
Amplified by Q-Tip.
Ah.
That album is all, mostly Jay Dilla beats on there. So
You know what's weird about that record is I got exposed to that from the Peloton. Like I was
oh really?
riding the bike. So there's a couple cats I like to ride with because they're hip to music and they like, stuff. So but there was I got on a hip hop kick for a little while because I was trying to expand my mind in terms of like different grooves I could write to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the bike one day and I was like, what is this? And I was like, I know it's Q-Tip. I can tell. But like, what is this music? Like, and that's how I got hip to that, man. It's so
Do you remember what song it was?
Oh,
was it like Breathe and Stop or something like that?
I don't know off the top of my head. So terrible with song names sometimes.
Man, like the first 3 songs on that album, it's just masterful the way those all feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Q-Tip.
I love Q-Tip too. And that was my intro to Dilla without even really knowing it. Was the last 2 album, or I'm sorry, not including the album that came out after Fife passed away, but back when they were originally going, their last 2 albums they put out was Beats, Rhymes, and Life, and then the Love Movement, and those are very Dilla heavy influence in collaborative records. And but I actually didn't know who Jay Dilla was until the day he died. That's when I learned his name.
Man, this is like what's happening to you, man. Cobain, Jay
yeah,
Dilla.
right.
Oh, dude.
Well, I was already so deep into his music and had been into it since middle school but I just I didn't know that because and on Mama's Gun, on that Erykah Badu album, the second song, Didn't You Know, he produced that too. I mean, I was already listening to him, and then I went to a barbecue. And when did he pass? 2005 or 2006, I want to say,
That
or
sounds
maybe
right
oh
around there.
seven. Maybe it was 07, I think.
It was early hot.
Yeah, and so it was kind of, it was before the internet was really popping with information about these artists, and there was a DJ there, this guy Nick McCarthy, Aspect, yeah, DJ Aspect, and he was mourning the loss of Dilla, and then he showed me Donuts because it had just come out like the day before he passed or something. What up, originally IK? I see you. I see you. That's one of my homies. Like he's always on my live streams.
Oh, hell yeah.
I actually never met him before, but they call
February
themselves
10th.
the Boot Babies.
Nice.
But yeah, so I learned about who Dilla was that day. And then at the same exact time learned about Sa-Ra Creative Partners. I don't know if you know about Sa-Ra.
No.
Shout out to my man Omas Keith, who I met for the first time last year, but he's 1/3 of Sa-Ra Creative Partners. And yeah, they produced a lot of the stuff on Erykah Badu's album New America. And I met Omas last year at DJ Jazzy Jeff's house.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to meet somebody, that's a place to meet somebody, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you, so since we're kind of on the tip of production, I find, so when you started off, I know you said your dad had reel-to-reels and stuff, but did you start off at all with like a Tascam 4-track, or did you start off like bouncing tracks through something like that? Like, what did you actually start on?
I started on a Fostex 8-track reel-to-reel. I still have it. It's sitting over here. You want to see it?
Heck yeah, man. If you can.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah, so that was my dad's tape deck. Oh shoot. All right. Now look at see, I messed it all up.
That's all, no, it looks fine now.
Sorry. Yeah, I started on that, and but then my dad did bring home a cassette 4-track deck, and I did mess with that. In fact, I was in Rochester for Christmas, and I grabbed some of my old 4-track tapes that I made, and I do have some of my old reels here, but I hadn't had my 4-tracks. My wife was like, "Oh, is this my Christmas present?" Like all my demos of me when I was 7th grade. My voice is cracking and shit. It's really, that's great, it's really, man, funny. Yeah.
Well, so like for like these days though, like what DAW are you in again?
I use two. Well, I've been using Ableton Live for the last 6 years. I didn't start using that until I moved in here. I've been using Pro Tools for like 22 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything still goes into Pro Tools. I like to mix and master and final edits and stuff, and I'm just a lot faster in Pro Tools.
Yeah, editing tools in there are so easy. It's just like it's right there. So I wanted to ask you, like, in terms of when you're happy with how you've worked on a track, how everything is sitting, like what is your ideal of when you feel like a track is done, like in terms of where the drums are sitting, where the bass is sitting, like in your ears? I'm just curious about, because everything that you put out is so, like I said, so unique. It's so authentic. It's so authentically you. So I'm curious of what you're hearing frequency wise, of where things are sitting that makes you happy to be like, all right, this can go out in the world.
That's a hard one because it's all subjective, right? You just kind of know sometimes when it feels right. But I talk about this sometimes on my live streams when I'm creating something, how I try not to really think about music in a theoretical way. I'm thankful that I studied it and that I'm capable of communicating to musicians how something is played, or I'm thankful that I'm able to write music, like actually, write it out. But when it comes to creating it, I don't think about anything. I'm not thinking about really the notes. I'm just listening and reacting to things, and so I'm basing everything off of how it feels when I'm jamming with other people, when we're coming up with parts individually, but we're improvising it, and we're interacting with one another, and when I'm doing it by myself, that is what I'm going for, and really what helped inform the kind of template that I use and how I record inside Ableton. Um, so back to I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but like I don't necessarily think about what's the right note if we're talking about harmony. I don't necessarily think about what's the right thing to play in this particular moment. I'm looking for it to move air a certain way. Like that comes back to this feeling of like just knowing when it feels right, knowing that the kick and the bass are hitting the speakers the right way, and then this mid range is being filled up the right way, and then the top end is being filled up the right way. You can tell when something is missing, and hopefully you can tell when there's too much going on, because there's nothing like space. And I would argue that a lot of my stuff is pretty full sounding, and I more and more try to practice removing things. And in fact, I do that a lot to transition from one section to another. Rather than doing a drum fill, I might take the drums out, because it just does something to the air that's moving out of the speakers. It's hard to describe. And that idea is probably informed by watching DJs like DJ Jazzy Jeff or Premier, or all these guys that would drop a fader, and that creates this feeling where your body's like, oh, and then the groove
Yeah.
comes back in. You're like, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Hell yeah.
so that's what I'm looking for when I'm finishing a song. And if I got all those, and I don't feel like I'm wanting more, then it feels finished to me. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fair. How do
hmm
you usually pan your drums? Like, do you do it like a visually, like if you were looking at a stage, or like how do you like to pan drums in a
No,
mix?
I always think about it in terms of the drummer's perspective.
Oh,
So
okay.
the sound that I have on the drums is the sound. That's what the drum set sounds like to me when I'm behind the drums. And it's really funny if you think about it. Like this kind of traditional way of miking a drum set with two stereo overhead mics and then close mics on everything. Nobody, the audience or the drummer, hears the drum set that way. It's just, you just don't. And so I remember reading this interview with Phil Ramone, the great producer, did Paul Simon and Billy Joel, and he would talk about how to get a drum sound. The first place you want to start is by just putting a microphone back by the drummer's ear, and that's what they're hearing. So now start making moves based off of that,
Oh,
to
wow.
enhance those sounds. So I take that similar approach. That is also kind of, it's that Phil Ramone thing, and a hybrid of that with the great engineer and producer Glyn Johns, who worked on the Beatles' Get Back or Let It Be record, and then countless other stuff, Jimi Hendrix Experience, and the first three Led Zeppelin records I think he was involved in it.
Mm.
In Glyn Johns, his method for recording the drums is one mono overhead, and then a microphone back over by the shoulder of the drummer. So, but on the floor tom side, it's just that and a bass drum mic. That's his drum sound. But I want a little bit more flexibility, so I also mic the snare drum up close too. So for a long time, it was just those four mics, and then I added this other mic after learning about the Daptones records that I love so much, like the Amy Winehouse Back to Black record, and all the great stuff that comes out of that facility. They a lot of that drum sound is one singular mic that is placed over kind of where like So if I'm sitting behind the drum set and the rack tom is here, the snare's here, hi-hat's here, this microphone is kind of down underneath the crash cymbal, capturing all of that. And they would use the Shure 55 mic, like the Elvis Presley, you know what I'm talking about? Those big mics.
Yeah, for sure.
They would use that. But I did it. I put an RE20, like a kind of like the mic you're using, a broadcasting microphone. I put one there, and then I ran it through actually that's the only mic I don't run through some of my outboard gear. It's running through a universal audio, like a what they call the unison preamp, and it's the V76, the Siemens Telefunken V76 emulation. And I just like kind of really saturate it through that, and it captures like all the top end. And so it became 5 microphones like 6 years ago. And then maybe 3 years into it, I added one more microphone, which is, a lot of people call it like the crotch mic. You have it over the bass drum, kind of by the snare, because I wanted something, if I was playing with a rim click, that would get that snappiness out of the rim click. And but it's a pretty minimal setup if you think about it. I'm not miking the toms. I don't have stereo overheads, and I'm using predominantly just dynamic microphones. I have one ribbon microphone, and that's the shoulder mic. I have a Coles 4038 back there, and I position all my mics that aren't, not the overhead and the snare drum, but the other mics kind of lower, because I want them all to I want all the mics to capture more low end from the kick drum. So I have that Coles, that ribbon mic, and then is my overhead. It's well, this goes back to my obsession with the Beatles, but it's a D19, an AKG D19, which is what they were using. I also have a D19 on the snare drum, and then the bass drum is a D20, AKG D20, which is also what the Beatles used. Those mics are all from like the 50s, and the crotch mic.
Where did you find that stuff?
Oh man, just like eBay and Craigslist, Reverb, all the usual suspects.
Man,
definitely. The snare mic, I got that off Craigslist a couple of years ago. That was a good find, because I have 4 D19s. Every one of them sound different, so I've gone through to find which one is the best sounding one. And now actually I even have Warm Audio has made their own emulation of it. I have one of those too, and sounds totally different than all the other ones. It still sounds cool, and they're just like really focused mics. They don't, like, whatever you're pointing it at, it's not really letting in a whole lot of other sound, and they're not particularly great sounding. And in fact, I would argue if you solo any one of the drum set mics, most people would think, oh, that's not the best sound. But the problem I feel like with a lot of modern engineers is that they try to make every microphone sound incredible. And so they choose the best mics for everything. But the drum set just doesn't really function that way. The drum set's more like an orchestra. There are all these different frequencies ringing simultaneously from different drum heads resonating and what have you. So you should approach each microphone like you're approaching each instrument in an orchestra. If it's the violins, that should be the top end, right? And the cellos and the violas, you're feeling in the mid range, and the bass, well, that's the bass, right? So I just kind of look for each one of those things on the drum set, and I choose to use whatever mic is pointing at that particular thing to be that certain frequency spectrum. So sorry, that's some nerdy ass shit. But
dude, this is why I do the show.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, man, it was a lot of trial and error over the years, and it didn't really fully come together until I moved in here, because then all of a sudden I had a dialed in room, and then this control room, which like you can really hear everything. And so I got to really play around and find my sound, and now I know it works. So man. And now I don't change it, except for, I might change a snare drum or cymbals out or something, just to get some different vibes. But it's always the same. It's captured the same way. Yeah,
it's got to be kind of nice too. Like when you're in like cooler cities like San Fran, like I would gather the Craigslist music instrument options are better than the middle of Idaho.
100%. But you know what? I mean, there was a time when I had a buddy who his like gig was he would just flip gear. He would buy it cheap off Craigslist and flip it on eBay. A lot of people do that, but he knew all these different sites. Like this one, I don't know if it's still around. It was called olivecraigs.com. So it was every Craigslist
Oh wow.
around the country, and I would look for stuff on there and find stuff and email people in like Florida, but like, hey, I would pay for shipping if you would ship that to me, you know, and get shit that way. So there's probably something like that out there still. I don't really buy. I try not to buy a lot of gear. Although I just bought this drum machine that's sitting here. So, you know. Yeah.
What drum machine is it?
Okay. Well, this is some funny nerdy
That's fine.
shit.
Let's do it.
Well, okay. So Behringer just made this emulation of the Linn drum. You know what a Linn drum is?
I do. Yeah.
So yeah. So I also actually have a real Linn drum over here. This is the funny shit, right? And the Linn drum, I will never get rid of that. That was a gift from a fan. I think it was like 2017. The San Francisco Chronicle ran an article about me and all the work I was doing, and this guy emailed me out of the blue. He's like, "Hey, I had no idea you lived in San Francisco. I'm a huge fan of your music. I have something that I think you might like. And I don't know if it works, but I want to bring it to you." And it was a Linn drum. And I was like, what? And so this guy brings me a Linn drum, and it powered up, but it did not work. And then I called, I contacted Roger Linn, because he lives here in the Bay Area. And I said, I have this thing. I don't know how to fix it. Do you work on these? And he's like, no, I don't work on those anymore. He's like, but I know a guy that does, and he's down in LA, and he connected me with him. And it turns out that guy was everybody's drum machine tech. He was Jay Dilla's drum machine tech. He was Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis's. He was Michael Jackson's. He was Prince's drum machine tech. What? And so he just brought my whole Linn drum back to life, and then added extra tuning knobs and added MIDI to it, and then made a handful of the proms in there interchangeable. And then he burned me proms from the LM1, which was the machine that Prince would use. It was the earlier generation before the Linn drum came out. And so I've got this great machine. It's still a little bit noisy, as a lot of that old gear is. And then Behringer comes out with this thing that emulates the Linn drum, the LM1, the Linn 9000, and it's $400. And it has pads instead of buttons, and you can load your own sounds into it and still take advantage of that 12-bit, 8-bit tuning. And it sounds exactly the same. In Roger Linn, he wrote an op-ed about this machine being sent to him by Behringer, and he checked it all out. He even opened it up to see how it worked. He was like, I can't fully endorse these guys because of ethic reasons. They've really just kind of ripped off my machine. He's like, but I will say, after opening it up and seeing, I don't know how they're actually selling it this cheap, because they're using like almost exactly the same kind of schematic and parts that we used. I was like, well, shit, you just kind of endorsed them by saying that. And so I bought one because, I tried it out at the NAMM show, and then I immediately bought one. And because that one is, the real Linn is worth like, anywhere between like $5,000 and $10,000. That thing over there. Nuts, and that's just going to continue to go up in value. And it's a little more fragile. And I've rented it out before. In fact, I rented it to Kanye West a few years ago, which was because he was making a record in town. I was the only guy in town that had one of those things, And so I want to keep it in good shape. So my feeling is, right now I'm putting this new one in through the ringer, just testing it out, seeing what I can do with it. And so far, so good. I just finished making a track with it, and it sounds amazing. And I think I'll probably put that one away and keep it in a case and keep it, safe. And if I need to travel with one, I will travel with the Behringer one, because it's at that rate, it's like almost, disposable.
Right? Are you like chomping at the bit to start using this Behringer more? Like, have you already written a bunch of stuff? I'm sure you like.
I've done 2 songs with it so far. I'm on this kind of crazy roll right now where I have this company called Track Tribe that with some of my oldest friends that I've known like half of my life, and we're just building our own library of music. And so we're just kind of on this roll right now of just making a lot of music. I was tasked with trying to make 20 songs in the last month, like full songs with vocals and everything. So I've been hiring different vocalists to top line over stuff, and just been kind of cranking it out, see what I'm capable of, while also maintaining trying to be a good dad and a good husband as well.
Man. Yeah, it's a balance.
It's a balance, man.
It's
Absolutely.
a balance.
But man, without the family, I don't think I would have as much drive, because the work wouldn't be as meaningful as it is. You know, when there are people involved that are depending on you to succeed, and you want to succeed at something you love rather than something you hate. When they're depending on you, then all of a sudden you stop thinking about yourself, and you stop being so precious about the shit, and you just start getting it done.
Yeah.
And then you get to look back at it, and you're like, wow, that actually doesn't sound bad, because I wasn't thinking about it. I was only relying on my vocabulary, my chops that I've been working on my whole life. Yeah. All of a sudden I got out of my own way. And I think that's something that we're all trying to do as artists, is to stay out of our own way. So the best shit comes out of us.
Yeah. Amen.
No paralysis by analysis.
A friggin' man.
Yeah.
Well, let's do the lightning round get down. And like I told you, I got to like maybe the top 3 sentences. But
see, man, you got to stop me. I'll get on a roll and shit, you know.
That's fine, dude. This was a blast.
Oh, good.
Right.
Good.
So let's do this lightning round get down. I'm going to put on a metronome at 112 cruising altitude for a little bit of suspense. And I'm going to ask you 10 questions.
Okay.
You can the rapid fire, but
is that 120 beats per minute right there?
It's at 112.
112. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why, dude. It just is. And it's no rhyme or reason. It's just been 112 for friggin' 4 years. So
okay, I love it.
Can't change it. But anyway, I'm gonna ask you 10 questions. You can explain your answers if you want to. You do not have to, but it's welcome if you want to.
Okay, I'll try not to.
The first question is always the same.
Okay.
Lennon or McCartney?
McCartney.
Onion rings or mozzarella sticks?
Ooh, onion rings.
OK Computer or the Benz?
OK Computer.
For a guitar amp, miking it up, 57 or ribbon? If you can only
ribbon.
Use one. Okay.
Ribbon.
Willie Weeks or Jamerson?
Oh, come on, man. You can't do that. Jamerson.
Death row. Okay, you're on a death row. You have a last meal. What is that meal?
Oh, probably like a bone-in ribeye, medium rare.
Okay. Bill Withers, Carnegie Hall, Donny Hathaway live.
Oh, you can't do that shit. Oh man. Donnie live. Yeah.
Okay. Big hi-hats, like talking like Steve Jordan hi-hats or small hi-hats?
Like traditional medium 14-inch hi-hats. That's what I like.
All right, cool. Horseshoes or cornhole?
Probably cornhole.
Okay. And then here's the last one. Sometimes it's the easiest, sometimes it's the hardest.
Okay.
If you could choose one album, does not have to be your favorite album of all time, but if you could choose one album and erase it from your memory, just so you could go back and experience it for the first time again, what album would that be?
It has to be one album?
You could throw a couple. It's okay.
It would have to be Rubber Soul and Revolver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Tell me why.
I don't know. It just there's so much information on both of those albums. They kind of feel like it's like part 1 and part 2, you know, because they did them the same year. Mm-hmm. And that's just like the moment where everything started to change for them, where they just became these remarkable. I mean, they were already remarkable songwriters, but now they became remarkable songwriters paired with experimenting with the studio and what they could do sonically. And I don't know. I got into the Beatles and started by loving their early stuff in growing with them. That was really it. It wasn't like I mean, I did hear the White Album before anything, but And the White Album is actually my favorite of all their stuff. But those two albums, I have these memories of listening to them over and over and over again on cassette in the backseat of my parents' car while going on road trips. And those are just like some of the best memories I have of being by myself. Even though I was with somebody, I had headphones on. I'm by myself, like I'm in my own space. And I would give anything to feel that same way that I felt that of discovering that stuff. So.
Mm. Is there any like new bands or anything that you've discovered recently that you've been like knocked out about?
Yeah, that guy McGee. Have you checked him out?
Oh yeah, that is he from the UK, right?
No. He's from L.A.
Oh,
Oh,
is he?
actually, he's from Jersey originally, but
Why did I think he was
he's
from
down
the
in
UK?
L.A.
Yeah, he's got a really interesting style in terms of guitar.
Yeah, it's in songwriting. What is it called? Two Star and the Dream Machine or something like that, I think. Yeah,
I'm not
Two Star and the Dream Machine. Or I'm sorry, Two Star and the Dream Police by McGee.
okay.
And yeah, my wife and I, we watch Saturday Night Live every week. And actually, Will Blades, who I know was on your podcast, was staying with us, and the three of us were watching Saturday Night Live one night, and he played, and none of us had ever heard of him, and I was so fucking knocked out by the first song that he played. I was like, who is this? Like, this sounds. I hear like the Police, I hear Peter Gabriel, I hear Prince, like I hear Metheny, like I hear all this different shit, and this guy's playing as a trio. He's obviously very good at the guitar, but a great singer, great performer. Just the whole production was so cool, and it was modern but clearly live, and it just got me really excited. And when I started listening to that record, actually my buddy Mike, who plays bass in King Canyon with me and Eric Krasno, he was the first person I sent that record to after I heard it. And we both started talking. I think Mike said, I feel like listening to this, like I don't know anything about music. And we're both, it's like, and because it's just like, wow, this guy just really, it's like, I feel like those are once in a lifetime kind of artists when they come around that really have something that is theirs that they are offering the world, and that got me really excited hearing that stuff. So
that's amazing.
I can't wait to hear what else he does.
Do you know about that dude Ryan Scott?
I know that name. Who's Ryan Scott?
So he's in New York now, I think, but he's like, if you don't know like any of it, you would really like his shit. Like,
Okay,
if you're not super hip to him, even if it's like periphery and you're hip to him, go check him out. There's like a bunch of stuff. There's a record he put out in 22 called Cookies.
Oh, okay.
That is.
This guy. Holy shit.
He's
so
gnarly.
Good. That A Freak Grows in Brooklyn, that record. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So the guitar player that I play with a lot out here, his name is Jackson Allen. I don't know if you heard any of that Aloe Black record I produced last year, where we actually took a bunch of. So you know who Aloe Black is? Like, I need a dollar.
Yes.
Dollar. Okay, so I produced. I produced a whole album for him, but it got actually released as 2 EPs, which sucks, unfortunately, because the way Spotify delivers EPs, it's all lumped in with singles, so you kind of miss it. It's not delivered as an album. But Aloe came to me a couple years ago. He found me on Instagram through my music being used in somebody's video, and he was like, "Hey, I'd love for you to produce an album of mine." And we started talking on the phone about how like all these classic soul artists used to cover rock songs. So like Aretha or Ray would, or Stevie would cover the Beatles or the Stones or something. And he wanted to do a record like that. And then I suggested, well, what if we did that same approach, but rather than music from that era, we did like 90s rock. So Nirvana, Soundgarden, those bands. So we did a whole album of that, or 10 songs, where I took those songs, and with that guitar player I was talking about, Jackson Allen, and this keyboardist, Max Cowan, the three of us kind of just harmonized everything. Like basically just took the melody and just made new songs with it. And then Aloe would fly up here from New York and record his vocals over it, and that was the album. But in that, while working on that record, Jackson hit me to Ryan Scott, and I was like, "Whoa, this shit is unbelievable!" And yeah, super killer artist. So he's in New York. I didn't know that. That's cool.
I think he's. I think he might be in Brooklyn, possibly. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Sure.
But like, have you been watching Severance?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We just watched the latest episode
Dude,
last night.
the music in this season is like
So
talking
good.
about taking like a soul band, taking like an old tune like or a rock tune like Sunshine of Your Love.
Uh-huh.
That version of that tune, when I heard it on that episode, I was like, who is this? What is this? Why have I never heard this version of the song? But they're doing such a good job pulling
Yeah.
music and a lot of funky stuff too, man.
Oh yeah, the episode I watched last night. Was it Charles Bradley or something that they were using something?
When that guy's driving the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounded
So
like one of
good.
those Daptone records, or it sounded like it was an old record, but I felt like it was a modern record that was trying to sound old. I don't know how to explain it,
I
but
wonder
you
who's the
can kind
music,
of tell sometimes.
who's like the music supervisor on that show and picking all that stuff. I
I don't
know, like
know. I'd like to submit some music to him though.
you should, dude. I think they got picked up for season 3.
Oh,
So
did they?
yeah,
Sweet.
I think it's greenlit. So, well, Otis, dude, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast to chat with you. And
Oh
hear your
man,
story.
likewise. Great to be on. Happy to do it, and have me again. We can do a part 2 if you want.
Yeah, we could do that next season or something. Everybody, if you're listening on Apple or you're listening on Spotify, Otis McDonald or otismacmusic.com is the website. You're on Instagram. If you just search you'll find you.
Yep.
Search them on YouTube. And there's a ton. I didn't even get into this, but I wanted to get into all that YouTube library stuff. We didn't get into that, but Otis has a shit ton of music out there.
20 albums. Yeah, I've released 20 albums since 2018.
So support this cat, listen to his music, and man, it's just such a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah. Anything to promote before we head out?
I came out with a new song a couple of weeks ago called "We Need Joy," and that's the latest. But I'll have another one coming out shortly. And if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm playing a show on March 28th at the Chapel, and with the live Otis McDonald band. I'll be behind the drum set singing and up front, so it'll be fun.
That sounds great. Yeah. Well, everybody else, Otis, you can hang out 1 second, but everybody else, take care of yourself, take care of each other.
Peace.
We'll see you next time.